two news companies, both alike in dignity, in Fair Verona book, where we lay our scene. From ancient grudge, break to new mutiny, where civil posts make civil hands unclean. From forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers run and elope. Or do they? Starcrossed is a game experience meant to raise awareness of the spread of misinformation by enmeshing the reimagined Shakespeare story with gameplay that helps players pinpoint common misinformation techniques. Our story follows Romeo and Juliet, two social media influencers who are children from opposing news corporations Montague News and Capulet Corp. Your role as the player is to pick posts to share in order to gain your own mass influence. Will Romeo and Juliet be together? Will you choose to spread the misinformation their friends or families post? Or will you share their truths? You have the freedom to decide how this story ends.
Alrighty, hi everyone, we are Hedgedo Studios. As you all saw, Starcrossed is our capstone project. Let's start with introducing the members of our team. My name is Jody Ling. I am the project manager and game designer of our group.
I'm Hikma. I'm the UX UI designer for the group.
Hi everyone, I'm Jie. I'm UX researcher in this project.
Hi, my name is Ryan, and I'm the developer of this project.
Today, we will be presenting our design process and the steps we took to develop our capstone project, which was, first, establishing the goal, second, defining the problem, third, conducting the research, fourth, ideating our designs, and lastly, developing the solution. First off, the goal of our capstone project. To give a brief reminder, Starcrossed is a web browser game experience meant to raise awareness for teens and to teach them the skills to pinpoint misinformation techniques commonly used in social media and articles to mislead people. The ultimate goal was to interweave an engaging narrative and enmesh it with an interactive gameplay that would help encourage our target audience to reduce the spread of misinformation. The next stage of our design process was defining the problem. We decided to tackle on this issue revolving around misinformation due to how prevalent the issue is today in our society. What really validated this was what we found through our personal survey. Key findings were, people were taught old fact-checking techniques in high school. The likelihood of someone checking a source is about 50-50. 73% of people get their information on social media, and 50% of people may or may not trust friends and family if they make a claim, while 22% are very or always likely to trust their friends and family's claims. Once we had a better understanding on the aspects of misinformation to address, we developed a research question. The core question that dictated all of our design decisions and approach was, how do we intertwine an engaging narrative with education about an objectively dry subject, such as combating misinformation on social media?
Through our initial research, we became aware that an older demographic would be harder to sway the opinions of, so we opted for a more impressionable user base, such as teenagers and young adults, keeping in mind that these two demographics have the potential to have a long-term impact in society in the future. Our main persona is Jax Adam, the board teen, and our secondary is Granby, the skeptical Gen Z. Here is an extensive list of our desired user outcome we have hoping to achieve when playing our game. To their core, this consisted of teens being able to identify misinformation on social media quickly, as well as being inspired and more mindful of what they choose to share on their personal accounts. After going through an extensive research process throughout our game's development, we were able to come up with ways to incorporate key fact-checking techniques within our game. This mainly presented in the form of hints we help users make informed decisions while they play, and badges were also intended to be given based on the specific gameplay behavior. As extra content, we added an extended version of our tips on our main website. specific key concepts that we were able to incorporate in our game demo were examining headlines, verifying account sources, and reading URLs, and reading through textual content.
Next, we worked on the formation and development of the Design Ever Capstone project. The biggest question you all may be wondering is why we picked Romeo and Juliet as the basis of the narrative. The reason is because it's universally known and relatable, especially for teens, since the play is a required reading in their high school curriculums. The idea of giving players their own autonomy and ability to change the ending of this iconic story through what post they choose to share was the biggest point of interest we wanted to invoke. We developed Romeo and Juliet to be akin to a type of popular influencers you would see in real life. In this case, Romeo is an amateur photographer and model who tends to make edgy captions to vent and gain attention. Juliet is meant to be more artsy, sweet, and an inspirational character who loves poetry and other crafts. All in all, we wanted these characters to feel as relatable as we could in order to encourage more empathy and interest towards them over the course of the game. Finally, we came up with a solution upon how to address our main objective and goals for our capstone project. Due to Figma's limitations as a program, we split our prototype into three parts. The first features the introductory portion of the game, as well as the tutorial to help players get immersed into the game. The second part, which we'll show here, features the bulk of the misinformation content, in which players need to pick one out of the 3 social media posts to share about specific news that happened in the morning. With our Figma prototype, we really wanted to showcase what the game would visually look like if we had the time to fully implement it. The last part features more of the narrative progression of the game, as well as 3 endings each player could obtain which correlated to which of the 3 articles they choose to share.
We wanted to acknowledge and thank our 9 user testers of our game's Figma prototype. Through this test, we found out that our approach of the design problem and game was overall successful and positively received. Important key things were that 7 users validated that they didn't learn about fact-checking during high school. 8 users also noted the game's narrative as a delighter.
In order to help us figure out a solution to our question, we consulted a few domain experts and our stakeholders throughout our project, which we wanted to acknowledge here. These people were Don Brayman, Jim Flatmo, the team from Avanade, and the team from Substantial. Each provided a lot of wisdom that helped immensely throughout the development of our project, which ranged from game ideas, helping us understand how our key users learn, time management, and best UX practices. What we have to share last is our game's coded prototype and website. The live coded prototype was created to show more of what the functionality of the game was intended to be like. The game starts with a step-by-step tutorial on how each of the elements from our prototype works. After the tutorial, we developed the functionality where players have to pick between the 3 new posts. We wanted the game to look much like an SNS homepage, such as Facebook or Twitter. So extra things that we developed were stuff like allowing players to like random posts, as well as write their own post captions. For the website, we wanted to showcase extra content, such as what we would have wanted to include if we had the time. So stuff like love meter and credibility meter, hidden DMs, night scene, Figma prototype, and badges, and illustrations. We also have a page dedicated to extra resources for players to learn about misinformation if they wanted to expand their knowledge. We summarized some useful tips for users and organized them into a framework with a simple structure that can be referenced when looking at information on social media. With that, that's all we have to show you guys for today, and we're open to questions.
Awesome. Okay. Rachel asks, were there any games or interactive fiction which inspired this project?
Yeah, I can take this one. Yeah, so we researched a lot of fact-checking education games, and to help us better understanding the design space of our game idea, we take some general inspiration from the famous game like Bad News and Reality Check.
One of the next questions would be, David says, I'm curious about what about the narrative made it a delighter for your user testers? Could you elaborate on that?
Sure, I can at least answer the delighters that was mentioned through my user testing. For my sister and the other teen that I tested, I think the fact that the premise revolved around Romeo and Juliet was really interesting to them. Like they wanted to know more about the game's world and how we approached the modernization of it, and how each post that they would share would affect the story, since the original story has a concrete ending to it.
Awesome. David says, great set of user outcomes. Were you able to create enough of a prototype to test how well the user outcomes would be achieved?
Ikma, could you answer that one?
Yeah, so we were able to design two separate types of a prototype. So as Ryan stated earlier, a coded prototype, which showcased more of the interactive aspects, while the Figma prototype showcased more of the each part. So we divided into three parts, and each of it showcased tutorial, the main aspect of the game, which was the teaching the fact-checking skills and how to identify that. And then the last part was more of the narrative, trying to tie in the whole narrative that we had developed for the game.
Great. The next question would be, can you talk more about some of the insights from user testing through the different stages of fleshing out the design?
Would you repeat that or elaborate?
Oh, yeah, sure. So first I'll repeat. Can you talk more about some of the insights that you've gotten from user testing through the different stages of fleshing out the design? So I assume like in the different stages of fleshing your design out.
Oh, okay. Some things that we noticed with the user testing that we didn't consider before was that people tend to skim when they go through the social media feed and dashboard. So what we thought, like we had the order of the posts, they kept flipping around to different posts. So that was something that we had to consider. There was also making the hints more visible and clear, as well as like the text a little bigger. Yeah, those were some interesting insights that we had.
Awesome. All right. Caleb asks, I love the idea. What was the hardest part for the design?
I would say the hardest part was coming up with the game concepts and the game content. A lot of it was writing the text. We had to do that ourselves. Collecting pictures, we had to do ourselves. Initially, we were going to create illustrations, but we had no capacity for that. So we had to really prioritize mostly the written content, what order the posts would be. And yeah, that was very difficult. We wanted to do a full day of the game, but we ended up just fully developing the morning portion.
So next question is, do you see the game just being played for fun, or do you envision it as also functioning as a lesson plan for teachers to learn about misinformation in the classroom setting?
I kind of see it as both, though I see it being more successful with professors kind of facilitating the sharing of the game, and, for example, English teachers sharing it while students read Romeo and Juliet to help them better understand the story, as well as for their research papers, like, help them with how to fact check properly. I think that would be a great way to incorporate the game.
All right, and last question. Did those prototypes give you information about how well the target user outcomes were achieved? So I think it was referenced to a different question, but.
With that, I feel we weren't able to fully measure that yet, since most of the usability testing was done with an earlier prototype of our game. And we were intending to send out a survey for our user testers to see if, like, weeks in advance, if they still were mindful of the posts that they share on social media.
Awesome. Great job. Thanks so much.